So first of all, tonight's class is in the memory of Yitzchak Tzvi ben Yosef, as the Shema should have an elevation. Even though I promised you that tonight's class would be on Queen Esther, my wife told me no the difference if I switched. I guess, what? She doesn't know my crowd. Just know that you guys are actually loyal and listening and paying attention. So, the truth is, I'll be 100% honest and transparent with all of you, is that I had a very busy day with a lot of mitzvahs, Baruch Hashem, funerals, and many details that are not for public, that things that had to be arranged. It was just one of those days. And I came home like an hour ago, and I already had a beautiful Mordechai class. I learned something fascinating. And I could have pulled off an Esther class. I could have. But I knew in my heart I wouldn't do justice to Queen Esther if I would just wing it, so to say, and go on what I have, because there's more I want to research and etc. So, So, I promise you the next class is going to be amazing. I'm very confident in that. Because I'm going to teach you things that most people don't know. I didn't know everything I teach you tonight, I didn't know until last week when I was learning. So, you're going to get a good class, don't worry. And I'm not winging it. This is a class that I actually learned last week. I learned some beautiful stuff. I didn't know everything I teach you tonight. In addition, those who were getting nervous who didn't see me on Facebook, that's also because thank God Karina's back. She went back to the Restream website, which doesn't work. I tried, it didn't work, but it's fine. I'm glad she's back. Anyway, hi Andrea, hi Gail, hi everyone. Okay, so anyway, we're going to do Mordechai. It's going to be fantastic. I'm going to teach you some beautiful new things. I am going to give you, I believe, such a radically new way of looking at Mordechai that I was blown away by it. So I'm excited to teach it. So I didn't want to wait till next week. I had something good to teach. Why would I wing Esther when I can give you something good? Okay? You guys will forgive me if you wait one more week for Esther.
Yes, make us come back again.
Yes. I'm going to tell her I felt loved by all of you that were looking forward. And now the pressure's on for next week's class. Now the pressure's really on. I told you I'm going to give you... it's okay. I've been learning. Last week I was already learning. It's okay. Should we start at the beginning? The beginning. Bereshit. Yeah, that's the real beginning. But we're not going to go so far back because then we'll never get to Mordechai. If we start from there, we'll never finish. We're going to start from when the Torah introduces us, when the Megillah introduces us to Mordechai, which is actually in the text that I prepared for you, chapter 2, verse number 5, where the Megillah tells us, Ish Yehudi. There was a Jewish man who was B'Shushan Abira. Here it translates as a Judean man in the Shushan, in the capital. His name was Mordechai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimi, the son of Kish, from the tribe of Binyamin. So first of all, I copied this verse because I want you to recognize that this is the very first time that a person is ever called a Jew, a Yehudi. So everything we're going to talk, until this point in Jewish history, Jews were described as Yisraelim, Israelites, or the Hebrews. And then when we came to the land of Israel, we became known as Bnei Yisrael, or in English, Israelites. That's who we were. We were the Israelites. At what point do we switch from being Israelites, or being called as Bnei Yisrael, the sons of Israel, to becoming Jews, Yehudim? It happens right here in this verse. The first person ever described as a Yehudi is Mordechai. Now there's a simple reason why Mordechai is described as a Yehudi. If you're familiar with the history of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, we know that after Solomon was the king, we have King David, we all heard of him, and his son King Solomon, they built a beautiful temple, the Beit HaMikdash, a magnificent time for the Jewish people, a time of tremendous peace and prosperity. King David had won many wars, conquered many lands, and the times of Solomon was a time of tremendous tranquility for the Jewish people. But it was also a time of very high taxes. It's a lot of taxes. King Solomon built a magnificent temple, besides the temple, a magnificent palace with, we mentioned his throne last week. Remember I mentioned it? Achashverosh tried to copy. The throne, it was magnificent. He spent a lot of money. And spending a lot of money actually costs money, believe it or not. You got to get money to spend it. There's some rule in physics like that somewhere. But anyway, so it costed a lot of money to run a very expensive and elaborate kingdom. And so the taxes were very high on the Jews. And when King Solomon dies, the Jews come to his son Rechav and they say, you got to lower the taxes. You got to make it easier for us. He's not sure what to do. So he goes to the elder statesmen, the elder advisors, and he says, tell me, should I lower the taxes? They say, absolutely. It is high, and you got to boost the economy and whatever. It doesn't sound like I'm giving a political class now, but that's the story. And then he goes to his young friends, to the young advisors. Hello, Nafar. He goes to the young advisors, his friends. He said, what should I do? Oh, you got to be tough. You got to show them who's boss over here. If you're going to give in to their demands and lower the taxes and acquiesce to their things, they're going to run you all over town. You got to stand strong and firm and tough and don't give in. So whose advice does he follow? The young people. He liked that advice. Yeah, you got to be tough and you got to don't give in to terrorism. So he says, not only, it's a different story, but briefly says, if you think my father was tough, I'll be tougher. If he had a whip, I'll have a whip with the cat o' nine tails or like the many ends. I'm going to be really tough. You know what happened? There was a civil war. And 10 of the tribes of Israel break off. They secede from the kingdom of King Solomon. And from that point on, the 10 tribes in the north of Israel became known as the land of Yisrael, of Israel. And the land of the King Solomon, where the temple was, where the main dynasty of King David was now called the land of Judea, the land of Yehuda, because it was under the rulership of the tribe of Yehuda. Which tribe stayed with Yehuda? Benjamin, because the territory, the core was the base minister was his territory, and some of the priests. That's only 2 tribes. The other 10 tribes are the tribes of the land kingdom of Israel. Now, it's another fascinating story. I'm not going to get into it, but eventually those 10 tribes are conquered by Sancheriv, the king of Assyria. They're taken out into exile. This is the story of the 10 lost tribes that we never hear from ever again. So, that's true. It's another few hundred years. I'm saying Eliyahu Navi, and there's a whole story here that I'm not going to get into another time. But the point is that on a simplistic level, Mordechai is being called the Ish Yehudi because he was from the exiles of the kingdom of Judea, the kingdom of Yehuda, and therefore today we are called Yehudim and not Yisraelim. However, that's only on a simple level. On a deeper level, you'll notice that in the very same verse, it tells us that he is from the tribe of Benjamin. So he's a man of Yehuda, and he's a man of Benjamin. So his tribe is Benjamin, but his identity is that of an Ish Yehudi, of a Jewish man. Which means by the Torah telling us that he is an Ish Yehudi, really this is our story right here. The premise of me in the Bible, and that every biblical character, if the Torah tells us about that person, it's because there's lessons for us to learn in our lives. There's never been a more black and white proof of that than when the Torah says he was a Ish Yehudi. He was a Jew. He was a Jew. And he was identified as a Jew. He looked like a Jew. He talked like a Jew. He walked like a Jew. He quacked like a Jew. That's how the expression goes, right? He talks like a duck and quacks like a duck, whatever. He was a Jew. And everyone knew that he was a Jew. And when he went around in the palace and he was a person of importance in the kingdom, there was no ambiguity of who he was. He was very proud of his Jewishness. We're going to soon talk about the story of him not bowing down to Haman. We'll get there in a few minutes. He was very proud of his Jewishness. And therefore he's called the Ish Yehudi. He was a Yachid. He was alone. He was the only one that wouldn't bow down. That's what Yehudi from the word Yach, connected to the word Yachid. He stood with a tremendous resolve. Now there's really more we could talk about Yehudi, and the Rebbe talked about the idea of Herda and things. But I just wanted to point out that the story of Mordechai is not the story of a person. It's a story of a person that represented Judaism. And when he walked around with the knowledge that who I am is not a private person from the family of Kish, from the family of Shimi. I'm not just from the tribe of Benjamin. I am representative of the entire nation of Yehudi, of the entire nation of the Jewish people, are reflected in the way I behave, in the way I stand, in the way I walk, in the way I talk. Tremendous sense of responsibility. And it's obviously right there we have a very important lesson for us. First of all, to walk as Jews. To walk, and we should be identified as an Ish Yehudi, because that's how we're identified. Whether we recognize it or not, people don't look at us as individuals. They look at us as Jews. So that's why his introduction, he's a Jew, but he was proud of it. He was proud of it.
And this is in the Torah?
This is in the Megillah. Everything on this page is from the Megillah. Chapter 2, verse 5 of the Megillah, which we're going to read, God willing, next week on Purim. So we have this man from the tribe of, living in the city of Shushan. He was a descendant of Yair. I'll just point out a beautiful medrash. Yair means also like to give light. So Yair means that he lit up the eyes of the Jewish people. Ben Shimi is to hear, that God, Shema is to hear, God heard his prayers, his voice was heard on high. Ben Kish also means to knock. He knocked on the gates of Rachanim, on the gates of mercy in heaven, and his knocks were answered. He was able to open up the gates of heaven from the tribe of Benjamin. Okay, that's who he is. Now the Megillah goes on to tell you that he was from the original exiles of Yoyachan. If you remember, 2 classes ago, and we mentioned again last week, there was different calculations. When does the 70-year period of the prophecy of Jeremiah begin? So there was that first group of exiles, when Yoyachan took in the first group of the leaders and the rabbis of the Jewish people, and in that first group of exiles was Mordechai. He was from the original exiles to Babylonia. But then you know what happened? He returned. When they got permission to build the Beis HaMikdash, which is a story that I mentioned about Vashti, right? Vashti, one of the first things at school was to stop the rebuilding of the temple that Achashverosh had allowed. So Mordechai was there when they were rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash. And this is another fascinating story. Perhaps some of you know it. There was a whole uproar within the kingdom trying to stop the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. Many people were against it. And the locals in Israel were against it. And they started to spread slander and rumors that the Jews were trying to create a revolution. And not just to build a temple, but to remain loyal to the kingdom of Babylonia. But that they were actually trying to secede and gain independence. And all the stories that were being made up. So eventually, Achashverosh sent a message they should stop the building. And so they decided to send 2 representatives to go and to represent, to argue, like and to have a court case if the Jews should be allowed to build the Beis HaMikdash or not. Who went from Israel to represent the Jews? Mordechai. And who was traveling to represent the enemies of the Jews that were fighting to stop the building of the Beis HaMikdash? Haman. This is the first time that Mordechai and Haman meet as they're traveling through the desert from Israel to Babylonia to go to have this audience. And guess what happens on the way? They're traveling through a desert. Haman was not a long-term he was a long-term thinker actually, but he was greedy also. And he got hungry. When you get hungry, especially if you're traveling, or something, they go traveling, the second they get into the car, they're already noshing, right? They haven't even driven out of the driveway yet. They're ready. We're going on the road trip. I got to eat on the road trip. We haven't even pulled out of our development already. We have the bag, and it's a road trip. We got to eat. You know what I'm saying? It's a religious commandment. So he was eating. The second they started the road trip, he was fresh whatever food he had, whatever Zeresh packed for him. Mordechai was more careful. He was more conservative, more careful not to eat up all of his food and drink up all of his water. And so they're traveling in the desert, and Haman had been eating all those popcorn or chips or whatever. They were salty. So he was drinking chips, water, and he ran out of water. And now they're in the desert, and Haman has nothing to drink, and Mordechai does. So Haman turns to Mordechai and says, please, I'm going to die of hunger.
Were they going together?
They were traveling together in a caravan, but they were traveling together through a desert. It's a fascinating twist of fate that Haman and Mordechai should be together. This is before the whole Purim story, before the beginning of the story. Well, they obviously knew who each other were. They were obviously, Mordechai is the leader of the Jews. Haman is the leader of the anti-Semites fighting against the Beis HaMikdash. They didn't live in Babylonia. They were together. They're traveling to the kingdom, to wherever the capital is. So maybe they're traveling from Israel, wherever they were traveling to. And Haman had nothing to drink. So Haman is begging Mordechai for some food, for some water. So what does Mordechai tell him? Now Mordechai tells him, I'll give it to you on a condition. You have to sell yourself to me as a slave. As a slave. Now Mordechai didn't want Haman as a slave. Mordechai didn't need slaves, and he didn't want Haman in his house, that's for sure not. He wanted Haman to acknowledge the superiority of Mordechai over him. Haman knew that. And Haman had no choice. He was desperate for water to live in the desert. And Haman signs it that he agrees. So Mordechai says, how are we going to sign? I need a document that you acknowledge that I saved your life and that you owe your life to me as a slave. So he signed. They didn't have paper. They were in the desert. They were traveling in a caravan. So he took the bottom of his shoe, Mordechai, the bottom of his sandal. He wrote on the bottom of his sandal that Haman is becoming my slave, and Haman signed the bottom of his shoe. Later on, when Haman wants everyone to bow down to him, and Mordechai refuses to bow, it's not just that Mordechai refuses to bow. It says Mordechai will lift his shoe. He would lift his shoe. What was he lifting his shoe? As a reminder to Haman, don't think you're so great. There was a time when you didn't have water to drink, and you sold your soul to me and became a slave to me. Which obviously explains why Haman would hate Mordechai so much. Right? But this is a fascinating story. It's a fascinating story where Hashem already put into place, before the story begins, it says before Vashti is killed, before all of that, when the temple was still being built, where even though the temple stopped being built, already then Haman signed on the bottom of Mordechai's shoe saying, I acquiesce to you, I give my rulership to you to be under your jurisdiction, under your rule. Okay, yes, question, let me see any comments here. Okay, shalom everyone that's watching, shalom Sarah and shalom Shira, and everyone else that's watching. Okay, fine. That's the first story. The next story of Mordechai is now he is, somehow his niece, Esther, becomes orphaned. Now, I'm going to talk about Esther next week, and so I don't want to give away too much this week, but basically she's orphaned. Her father passes away before she's born. Her mother dies in childbirth. So she's literally born alone in the world, and he adopts her. There's other versions of the story that she was left on his doorstep. Again, what? No, next week we'll talk about Esther. Next week. If she was really related, if he pretended she was related. Again, we'll talk about it next week. How he marries her, we'll talk about that next week, and the marriage between them and the relationship and all that's for next week. But I have to say this part of the story just so we keep the flow. So Mordechai is now raising Esther in his house. But you see already a loyalty that Mordechai has to his niece, that he takes her, he adopts her, he makes her as her own. And when the decree of Achashverosh came out that all the women should come to try out in the beauty pageant and to be chosen as the next queen, originally Esther remains hidden in the home. She does not leave the home. She doesn't leave the home. For several years she stays in the home. Eventually one day she goes out to the marketplace. She thought by then it'd be over. Or they were looking and whatever, they were searching. And they knew that people were talking about her. She went to the marketplace and there she was spotted and there she was arrested or kidnapped and she was taken to the palace. We all know the story. We're talking about Esther next week, how she eventually became the queen. I'll talk about that. But here we have the advice of Mordechai. Mordechai didn't know what was going to happen in the future. But Mordechai already understood that there's something happening here. And in fact, Mordechai had a very, very interesting dream. You want to hear a dream that Mordechai had? That you never heard before. I mean, dreams are important, but here's a dream. He saw that there was a great tumult happening in the world. A great tumult. The whole world was turning upside down, and there was tremendous chaos, and the angels in heaven were all turning. And then he sees that in the earth below there's two large crocodiles that are locked in battle. The two crocodiles representing him and Haman. And they were locked in battle. They each were on each other's neck. They were stuck together, and neither could prevail. And then came along this fountain of water. The fountain came, and it filled up the earth, and it washed away the crocodile, around the crocodile, and it lifted up the other one to be high up on top of the river, on top of the water, representing how Esther would come and wash away Haman and lift the Jewish people up. That was the dream he had. Now he had no idea what this meant. He didn't know how to, but he knew that there was something there. So Mordechai holds on to this dream, and he tells Esther, you have to go, and for now you should keep your identity secret. Your loyalty to the Jewish people, which is obviously the most important when we talk about loyalty. You have to keep your loyalty. However, even though you have loyalty, you keep it a secret. No one needs to know who you're really loyal to. And so when Esther comes to even though Esther's real name is not going to tell me next week, but she hides her identity, she comes to the palace. What happens? Haman makes a decree that all the Jewish people should be killed. Right? Now, by the way, there's a whole long period. This happens in the Megillah. We read it like in 20 minutes. We read the whole Megillah. If you're really fast, if it's late, you do it. Then you really do it fast. But actually, this whole story takes 12 years. So from when Esther goes to the queen until Mordechai makes the decree, until from Vashti dies till she becomes queen is 4 years. Then from when she's in the palace till the decree of Mordechai, or the decree of Haman against the Jews, another 3 years. So it's already 7 years later now. Okay, I'm saying time is moving, although it's 7 years later now. She's already there, and it comes out the decree of, 7 years. 7 years after she becomes a queen, that is the decree of Haman. 7 years after after she's a queen, is it the decree of Haman. Now, when Haman made the decree in a way that no one should know. He was worried that the Jews would find out, they would find a way of stopping the decree from happening. So when Haman gets a signet ring from Achashverosh, and he has his decree signed, that on the 13th day of the month of Adar, every single man, woman, and child will be killed, he has his decree signed, sealed, and sent out in secret to every single minister and of every single province in the entire kingdom of the entire land of the kingdom of Achashverosh, to seal the decree that goes out, and no one knows. It says, first that they should be ready, prepare armies, and the second decree is not to be opened until the 13th of Adar. That's when it should be opened. And in that second decree is where it said that they would be killed. How does Mordechai find out about it? No, Esther didn't know. Haman was not telling Esther what he was doing. Haman didn't know who Esther was, but he didn't know who she was, meaning they were not loyal. There was no friendship between Haman and Esther. How does he know? Eliyahu Navi gives him the decree. Elijah the prophet comes to Mordechai and tells him what has Haman decreed. Haman, he saw all the ministers leaving with all the horsemen running out with this edict, but there's a secret edict, and Eliyahu Navi tells him. And that's why Mordechai sits publicly outside of the gates of the king, wearing sackcloth and ashes. And Esther finds out that Mordechai is sitting outside in the morning with sackcloth and ashes in the gate of the palace. You have to be by the gates of the king's palace, dressed like a minister, dressed royally. Because Esther told the king, every wise king has Jewish advisors. Why do you have any Jewish advisors? So she says, you're right, who should be my Jewish advisor? So it says there's a great guy called Mordechai. I've heard he's very smart. And this is Mordechai was in the palace to take care of her and to guide her and to be with her. So Haman, so Eliyahu Navi rather tells Mordechai the decree. He's sitting by the palace. So Esther sends a messenger. His name is Hasach, to go find out why he's sitting with sackcloth and ashes. So Mordechai sends back with Hasach a copy of the decree. He says, this is what had been decreed by the Jewish people against us. You have to go speak up. What does Esther respond? I can't speak. What? I told you, Eliyahu Navi gave him. I don't know if he gave him a physical copy or if he just told him. But Eliyahu Navi says gave to her, from the exact words. I don't have it here, but if I remember correctly, he gave to her. Let me have a Megillah here. He gave to her, I'll tell you the exact words. There's a Megillah here. Whoopsies. The exact words, if it says he had a piece of paper or not. So she sent clothing. She sent clothing to Mordechai to know why he was dressed like that. So he says to her, Mordechai said to her everything that happened and all about the money that Haman had given to Achashverosh. So he didn't actually have a piece of paper. He had the knowledge of the decree. Not only did he have the knowledge of the decree, even that knowledge of the negotiation that had happened between Haman and Achashverosh. How do you know what happened? It says here, he told Esther how Haman wanted to give money to buy the rights to kill the Jewish people. How did he know? Because Eliyahu Navi told him, Elijah the prophet told him. So he gives this message through Hasach, he can't see the queen, through Hasach to go tell Queen Esther exactly what's going on. Okay, so Hasach comes and she tells Esther the words of Mordechai. So Esther then says to Hasach, and she says to Mordechai, tell him that all the servants in the kingdom know that you're not allowed to enter the king's chambers without being called, and I haven't been called to the king in already 30 days. And we discussed the paranoia and the insecurities of this wicked, evil man called Achashverosh, that his own wife couldn't enter into his palace for 30 days. She's not allowed to even come into his room. Forget about talk to him, you know what I'm saying? Not even allowed to be in his presence. We discussed that already at great length. What happens next? So Vayagidu leMordechai, it is told to Mordechai the words of Esther. It does not say Hasach told the words to Esther, told the words to Mordechai. It says it was told to Mordechai. Why was it told to Mordechai? Haman had spies everywhere. Haman sees Hasach is going from Esther back to Mordechai, from Esther back to Mordechai. What does Haman do? He kills Hasach. Simple. Simple. I mean, it's not so simple in those days, it was simple. He sees Hasach is transferring. He knew everything, Haman. Haman was controlling every single thing in the palace. Hashverosh thought he was the king, but the guy in charge was Haman. He was a control freak. And so Haman finds out that there's a message is going back and forth between Hasach and Mordechai. He killed Hasach. No more messenger. So Mordechai had to find out in a different way. What was said? Maybe through a prophecy. So Mordechai sent another message to say to her not to be quiet. And here comes some of the most beautiful lines in the entire Megillah. Some of the most, my personal favorite. I don't have only one, I have a few. But one of my personal all-time favorite verses in the entire Torah is right here, in this dialogue. Actually, I was not planning to talk about it too much, but I can't resist. So briefly, and then we're going to move on. Mordechai says to Esther, I know that you're afraid, I understand, but don't think that you will be able to escape. Don't think you're going to escape and it's going to be good for you. All the Jews will be cool. And if you will be silent at this time, salvation and miracles will still happen to the Jewish people. God will save us. Of that I have no doubt, says Mordechai. God will save us. But you and the house of your father will perish. And then comes the words. And who knows? If it was for this very moment, that you reached to the moment of being the queen. 7 years had passed. And next we're going to talk about the 7 years that Esther suffered as the queen. It was difficult. We're going to talk about it next week. There were 7 hard years, 7 years of concealment. And yet, says Mordechai, this is the moment. He says, who knows? Why I say, who knows if this is the moment? She said, this is the moment, right? Umiyadeh means it's beyond what you can understand. You can't even understand what happened, but there's a moment that now is here that is the entire purpose of why you exist. So either you're going to fulfill your purpose in existence, either you're going to live up to the moment and be who you are meant to be, and do something you think you can't do, but that you really could because this is who you're meant to be, or you'll have excuses. The Jews will still be saved. God will still take care of us, but you will have lost the chance to be His messenger. You'll have lost the chance to be the conduit of God's miracles and God's blessings. It's a very, very important message right here as well. Sometimes we get scared, we get afraid, we think we can't, we have good reasons why we can't. There's the law, and there's this, and the king said, and this one said. If the opportunity is in front of you, who can know if it was for this very moment that that you reached this pinnacle of your whole career, your whole life, for this very moment that you can save the Jewish people. Anyway, again, I'm forcing myself to move on. I'm forcing myself. I want to really elaborate on the point, but for another time. The point is, she recognized that this was the call of the hour. This was her whole purpose in existence. This is why she was there. And so she goes and she says, fine, get the Jews to pray and to fast. I'm going to go to the king. And she goes to the king and all that. In the meantime, what is Mordechai doing? We're going to talk about what Esther does next week. What does Mordechai do? He gathers 22,000 children. He gathers 20,000 children. The Tanoiki Shal B'Shabbat. Tanoiki Shal B'Shabbat means that the pure breath of children that have not sinned, pure of sin, he gathers them. And can you imagine, he gathers 22,000 children together, and he asks them, there's another story, he says that he saw 3 children when he first heard the decree. He saw 3 kids coming, and he asked them what verses they had learned in school. The third one said to him, each one said another verse of redemption. The third one told him, Utsu Eitzu, we say it every day in our davening. Very powerful verse. Utsu Eitzu V'Sufar, that they devise counsels and plans, and they discuss. Dabru Davar, they make up ideas, and they discuss ideas. But all their schemes and all their plans will not come to fruition. It will not happen. Why? Ki imanu keil, because God is with us. And when Mordechai heard this young child saying to him, Utsu Eitza V'Sufar, that they make all their ideas, their schemes, V'dabru Davar, and they talk, V'lo Yakum, it doesn't happen, Ki imanu keil, because God is with us. Mordechai says to the boy, God shall bless you. And that's why he says, Haman, your plans will go to garbage because God is with us. But with that trust, he gathers 22,000 children. But now the cat is out of the bag. They know why they're gathering. Mordechai has told everyone why. The whole world, everyone knows. And here you see the tremendous sacrifice of the Jewish people, inspired by Mordechai, that even though the decree was only against the Jewish people, they could have easily converted, and they would have been saved from the decree against them. Not only do they not convert, as the Alter Rebbe explained so beautifully, not only do they not run away from their Judaism and hide and say, we're not Jews, don't kill us. Remember, they were assimilated into Persian society, the way Germans were assimilated into German society, and the way Americans are assimilated to American society today. They were their friends, their neighbors, their co-workers, their next-door neighbors, their gym, their club mates or whatever, their golfing partners. And they don't only not run away from their Judaism, they embrace it. And the very same Jews that wouldn't listen to Mordechai when Mordechai said, don't eat from the feast of Achashverosh. Don't be tempted by the good food and the wine that will take you astray. Then they didn't listen. But now when Mordechai says there's a threat of death and annihilation hanging over your heads, at that moment they are inspired by Mordechai's unbelievable sacrifice. Mordechai shows his true leadership, his true ability to be what the Zohar calls a shepherd of faith, to be able to instill faith and strength and courage in the hearts of the Jews, that they should not be afraid to let their kids go study Torah with Mordechai. And 22,000 Jewish kids in the city of Shushan. Imagine how many Jews lived in Shushan. 22,000 children. A lot of Jews lived in Shushan. You understand the day, the tragedy that would have happened if Haman's decree went to fruition. 22,000 Jewish children come to gather with Mordechai. And here you have the greatness of Mordechai. On one hand, Mordechai knew we got to make plans. We got to get Esther involved. We got to figure out a way to go to the king. We got to use diplomacy. Can't just rely on miracles. We got to work. But at the same time, once Mordechai did what he could do to make diplomacy happen, and he convinced Esther to go speak to the king, Mordechai knew that what's the most important thing for me to do now? To gather the children to learn Torah. And that was the crux of the miracle happens with the Jewish children learning Torah. This is what arouses the mercy of God in heaven, to put his mercy upon the Jews and to protect us. Okay, so Mordechai gathers 22,000 children, and he inspires them, they're praying, they're learning, the spirit and the faith of the Jewish people is totally aroused. This is the heroism of Mordechai. This is how Mordechai is a true leader of the Jews, to be able to inspire the Jews in the darkest of times. At the moment when the threat of annihilation is over our heads, he's able to inspire the Jews to not just not run away from Judaism, but to embrace it and to publicly stand as Jews in a way they had never stood before. Before it had been Ish Yehudi, one single Jewish man preaching to the wilderness, don't go to the feast of Achashverosh. And now it's a nation of Jews, 22,000 children standing as one, praying to Hashem, fasting for 3 days straight with the confidence that that nothing will happen because God is with us. This is Mordechai. But now I'm going to tell you something very beautiful. And now we're going to come, even though it's late, to the second whole, something amazing to truly give you the appreciation of how unbelievably clear-minded and true to conviction and faithful and honest is Mordechai. I'm going to show you now. We mentioned before that Haman wanted to bow down to him, and Mordechai refused to bow down. Right? Why would Mordechai refuse to bow down? Well, before we read why, let's read it inside. Chapter 3 in your text, verse number 2. On the paper, chapter 3, verse 2. It says, and all the king's servants who were in the king's gate would kneel and prostrate themselves before Haman, for so had the king commanded concerning him. But Mordechai would neither kneel nor prostrate himself. So Haman says, I have a decree from the king. King has said that every single person in the land, or according to some opinions, everyone in the palace anyway, in the gates of the king, has to bow before me. And everyone's bowing down. Every time Haman walked by, everyone didn't just bow down like a sign of respect. They literally prostrate on the ground before Haman, except for Mordechai. Verse number 3, then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordechai, Madua ato overes mitzvahs hamelech, why are you disobeying the king's orders? Why aren't you listening to what the king told you to do? It's not Haman's idea to bow down. The king said to bow down. For next verse number 4. Now it came to pass when they said this to him daily. The Hebrew words are important. They said the same thing to him day after day. Why not bowing down? But he did not listen to them. So what did they do? They went to tell Haman to see whether Mordechai's words would stand up, for he had told them that he was a Jew. Why do they go tell Mordechai? Because he's a Jew. When they tell Haman, he's not bowing because he's a Jew. So there's open anti-Semitism here, but that's another conversation. Let's go into this story. On a very simple level, the reason why Haman hates Mordechai, as the text says later on, they didn't copy the whole Megillah here, but as it says later on, later on in chapter 5, where he left the first banquet of the Queen Esther, and he walks out and he sees Mordechai standing and not bowing, he's so full of wrath and anger, he comes up to his wife and says, Zeresh, I have everything. I have everything in the world, but all of the wealth that I have, and all of my power, and all of my might, and all of my influence, none of it is worth anything to me. As long as I see that Jew sitting by the gate and not bowing down to me. That's what he says. Meaning, it says also earlier, that when he saw that Mordechai wouldn't bow down to him, and maybe it's even the very next verse, he saw he wouldn't bow down, he was filled with anger and with wrath. Later on, he tells his wife, everything I have is not worth it. Because one Jew won't bow down.
Yeah, but he signed me on the shoes.
I know, that's okay. But why won't Mordechai bow? Why won't Mordechai bow? Seemingly, Mordechai is being a bedafkinish. You know what a bedafkin is? It's a Yiddish expression. There must be a good Hebrew word for it too. It's like just to be a contrarian, just like to put it to Haman's face. You think you're important? Bedafka. Dafka. So it's in Yiddish and Hebrew. Bedafka. Dafka. Meaning, you're saying to bow down? Bedafka. I'm not bowing down. Just because. I want to show you I'm not intimidated by you. Which is a beautiful sentiment. Ish Yehudi, he's a proud Jew. But sometimes, don't be so proud. You're causing problems for us. You're so proud, but you're getting the Jews into trouble. The whole reason why Haman wants to kill the Jews, says he was embarrassed to just kill Mordechai in the beginning. He wanted to kill all the Jews in the whole nation. Mordechai won't bow down because he's a Jew. So I'm going to kill the Jews. Later, he can't even wait till the 13th of Adar. He hates it so much, he wants to kill Mordechai first. But the whole threat of destruction and annihilation for the Jewish people is a direct result. I try to maybe copy the next verse to see that, or wherever it is. But Haman says, oh, he's a Jew, I'm going to kill all the Jews. I'm going to kill all the Jews. So the question is, why won't Mordechai bow down? What's so bad if he pretends to bow down to Haman? Bow down. Let him think he's important, but you'll keep the Jewish people safe. Instead, you on purpose don't. You see him walking out of the king's palace, he had a feast with Esther, and you won't bow down to him just in spite. Sometimes you shouldn't spite people. Sometimes you just got to swallow and just bow down. Never. Why never? Why would Mordechai not bow down? So there's actually a message, I think, he says that in Shayos is not to bow down before a person. We only bow down before God. But although we think today we don't bow down to anyone but God, the Torah is full of people bowing down to people. Just putting it out there. Right? When Abraham sees the guests coming, the angels, they're Arabs. He thinks they're idol worshippers. He bows down and prostrates before them. When Yitzchak bows down, Esav bows down, and everyone bows down to everybody. By the way, tell you that Medrash, Haman, when Yaakov met Esav, you know the story when Jacob meets Esav? You remember that story, right? When they meet, the two brothers reconcile. So Yaakov is coming towards the promised land of Israel, and he hears that his brother Esav is coming to meet him with an army of 400 men. He's very afraid. He divides his family into different groups. He sends forth a bride to try and appease him. And then what happens? When Esav and Haman and Yaakov finally meet, Yaakov doesn't stand strong and say, I'm not going to bow down to you, O Esav. Yaakov bows down to his wicked brother. So you're allowed to bow down to a person. He bows down to his brother. 7 times he bows down.
But isn't it a different bow?
He prostrated.
By bowing down to a king, you're basically accepting his
Yeah.
on you and his way of life, or whatever way that he wants to be on you. But bowing down to welcome someone into your home like Abraham, it's a different.
First of all, Esther bows down. I think Mordechai bows down to Achashverosh. Let's see if he bows down. but maybe not. But definitely, you find many people that bow down before kings many times. It's not. There's many times that people bow down before kings. The point is, I want to tell you the end of the medrash. So Haman says to Mordechai, "Why won't you bow down to me? You won't bow down to a person. Your great grandfather Yaakov bowed down to my great grandfather Esav. He prostrated. It says in the Torah that Yaakov not just bowed, he prostrated. Yaakov prostrated to Esav. So why are you being so stubborn? If Yaakov could bow down to my grandfather, how come you can't bow down to me?" So Mordechai says that was before Binyamin was born. When Yaakov bowed down, they only had 11 sons. I come from the tribe of Benjamin. Benjamin never bowed down to you. It's true that Yaakov bowed down. But Binyamin, who said he was a tribe of Yehuda, he was Ish Yehudi, but he was from the tribe of Benjamin. Binyamin never bowed down to your great-grandfather Esav, and I will keep that tradition, I will never bow down to you. So I'm not going to bow down to you. But the reason is not because he was a human being, because we find in those days, bowing down was not the same kind. Today we think of bowing down like an act of like total subjugation. I mean, there was still the idea of nullifying yourself, but it was like I shake your hand or whatever. Like bowing down was pretty common back then. Avram bowed down to visitors to his house. You know, it's hard to imagine you have visitors in your home, you bow down to them to come into your home. So it was a different. So there's another explanation brought in the Medrash in Esther Rabbah. Now why would Mordechai not bow down to Haman? Because he had an idol hanging on his neck. Haman was wearing a necklace, not a chai necklace, not a chamsa necklace, and not his his name. It was an idol. He had an idol, and this by everyone bowing down to him. What were they really doing in effect? They're bowing down to an idol. So Mordechai says, if you would be wearing an idol, it's one thing. You're wearing an idol. I'm not going to bow down to that. You're not allowed to do. But you can't bow down to an idol. Even if you're not worshiping, you're not allowed to bow down, so I'm not going to bow down. So you wouldn't bow down to the idol.
Even if that means that all these people are still recording?
Even if it means you're going to die from it. There's 3 sins that you're not allowed to do, even if it means to die.
But he didn't have the idol.
He had the idol.
So it's another
It's a medrash. Okay, so Nafar is not convinced about the idol. She wants a better answer. Okay. I'm not afraid of you, Nafar. I have a better answer.
It's another midrash, what about the first one?
It's a very famous. Ask my kids why Mordechai wouldn't bow down to Haman. And I'm sure my kids will tell you because Haman was wearing an idol on his neck. I'm putting my kids on the spot, but let's see. Well, you can try it out on Shabbos. Let's see if I have as much faith in my kids. Okay, as Chana had in you guys. Okay. You want a beautiful explanation of fire? You want something really powerful?
Always.
Something that my kids don't know, something amazing? There's a medrash as follows. It's a medrash, but it's a powerful one. Rachel had 2 sons. Who are 2 sons? Yosef and Binyamin. Says the medrash, since Mordechai is a descendant of Binyamin, and Yosef is a descendant of Rachel, both descendants of Rachel, therefore it is fitting they both should have the same test, and they both should have the same reward. What's the story of Yosef with the test and the reward? What was the test of Yosef's life? The test of Yosef's life is when he comes into the house of Potiphar. You all know the story. We've given many classes on it. He comes to the house of Potiphar, and there he's given full control to be the number 2 in the entire house. Until it says that the master gave him everything. And then what happens? Potiphar's wife, Mrs. Potiphar, we don't know her name, she becomes absolutely crazy with Yosef. And what does it say in the Torah? Every single day she would speak to him. Vayikidabra elav yoim v'yoim. And she would speak to him day after day, begging him to lie with her, to be with her. V'lo shama ela, and he did not listen to her to be together, until the day came when they were alone in the house, and she tried to grab him, and he was going to either be with her or not be with her. It's a whole other discussion. But anyway, it came the moment of truth, and he ran out of the home. He saw the image of his father at the window. He ran out of the home, leaving his clothing in the hand of Potiphar's wife, which she then used to frame him and have him imprisoned. Says the Medrash, the words are the exact same. There's only 2 times in the Torah where you find this expression. Look back at verse number 4 in chapter 3. It's the exact same words. Vayihi ka'amram elav yom v'yom. And it was when the servants of the king said to Mordechai day after day, they were pestering him and nudging him, bow down to Haman. The exact same words, Vayihi Kidabra Elav. This is what Potiphar's wife said to Yosef. She spoke to him, Yoim v'yoim, day and day. And then here it says, V'lo Shama Aleya. Mordechai didn't listen to them. And there it says, V'lo Shama Ilaha. Yosef didn't listen to her. So what happened? They ran to tell Haman, and she ran to tell her husband to see what would happen. This is their test is the exact same. And therefore their reward was the exact same. What was their reward? The reward was that eventually when Yosef came out of prison, what happened? What happened? Paro gave him his ring. What was the ring? His control. To be the second in command, to make any decrees on the kingdom. Yosef becomes the second most powerful man in the entire kingdom of Egypt, the entire superpower of that time. He was given the necklace of the king. He was given the chariot, the royal. He was taken on the whole parade with the king's clothing, with the king's crown, with the king's everything. Everyone should bow down to Yosef. And what was the reward of Mordechai after Haman was killed? Same thing that he gave. The words are the same. I have a chumash here. It says, "Vayitna pare gave, vayitna le Yosef, the tabas, the ring, to the signet ring to make rules." It's the exact same word that when Achashverosh gave to Mordechai, he gave the ring he gave it to Haman. He now gave it to Mordechai, and Mordechai became the second most powerful man in the kingdom to write any laws that he wanted. The words are the exact same. So the test was the same, that they both were being pestered to commit a sin. Yosef to lie with his mistress, Mordechai to bow down to the Haman and the idol on his neck, and they both held strong and they didn't listen, they didn't give in to the pressure that they were facing, and therefore they both got the same reward, that they got the signet ring of the king to be the second most powerful man in the kingdom to make any law that they wanted. Sounds good? Sounds good? Yeah, it was one big difference. What's the difference? What's the difference between Yosef's not listening and Mordechai's not listening? No, Mordechai could have been killed for it. He almost got hung on the gallows. Is the test of Yosef and the test of Mordechai really the same? Why does Yosef not want to live with his mistress? He would be going against his master, well, his father too, and God too. But on a simple level, what does he say to them? What does he say to Potiphar, Mrs. Potiphar? He says that your master, your husband, gave me control of everything in the house except for you. So if I'm going to be intimate and have sex with you, I'm going to be breaking the trust of my father, of my master, of your husband. So when Yosef is not committing adultery with his mistress, why is he not doing it? Out of loyalty to his master. Out of loyalty to the one that said you can have anything in the house except for my wife. When Mordechai doesn't bow down to Haman, is he showing loyalty to the king? The king said to bow down to Haman. The king said, who made the decree that everyone should bow down to Haman? The king made it. Well, we'll get to that idea in a second. The king said. So seemingly, who's not listening when Mordechai doesn't bow down to Haman? Is he being loyal to the king or is he disobeying the king? Disobeying. So it's very different than Yosef. Does it sound like it's different now? Yosef is being loyal to his master by not being intimate with his master's wife, and Mordechai is disobeying the king's command by not bowing down to Haman where the king commanded. Let's go back to verse number 2. Chapter 3, verse number 2. I'm going to read it in the Hebrew because the Hebrew is the secret here. You're not going to see what I'm going to tell you now in the translation. Kol Avdei HaMelech, all the servants of the king, Asher B'Shar HaMelech, that were in the gate of the king, they were bowing down to Haman. Why? Here's the next word that you must follow along with me. It's on the second line. Kichein tzivaloi hamelech. Nafar, you want to translate for me? Literally. Kichein, because, as this, tzivaloi, commanded. Tzivaloi, what does loi mean? To him, hamelech, the king. I want to make sure you're saying I'm translating this correctly. Who was commanded not that everyone should bow down to him? All the servants are bowing down. Why are they bowing down? Kichein, because like this, tziva loi, was commanded to him by the king. It doesn't say that the king commanded them. If all the servants had been told to bow down, then the verse would have said, Ki chein tziva lahem hamelech. Because the king commanded them to bow down. But it doesn't say the king commanded them to bow down. What does it say in the verse? The king commanded him that they should bow down. Who's him? Haman. Who else could it be? It wasn't Hasach. Meaning, there was never an edict from the king where the king said, bow down to Haman. You know what happened? The king trusted Haman. Haman had wrapped on his finger. The king had given Haman his ring before. The king told Haman whatever he wanted. So there was some conversation. I don't know exactly what happened. The king knew what he said. The king didn't know. The king said, maybe we'll talk about it. Maybe people should bow down to you. Maybe he never even said it. He made it up. The point is, Haman is the one that tells the people, the king said you should bow down to me. This was not at the command of the king. That's the implication. The fact that it says, Kichein tziva loy hamelech, the king commanded him, means somehow in a private conversation, and no one else was there, the king told Haman, everyone should bow down to you. Let's pretend that's what happened. I don't think that's what happened. I imagine that Haman manipulated the conversation somehow to make the king agree to it somehow, without him knowing, but Haman got an agreement from the king, and however he played the king's mind, oh king, I represent you, and I'm so humble to you, and so because I'm so humble to you, and I represent you, I should, everyone should bow down to me, because I'll be really bow down to you, whatever he told him. Something like that, probably, right? I can imagine this, right? Makes sense? Sounds right. It's all about you, O loyal king. I'm just your humble servant that feels no sense of self. All I care about is your honor and glory, so to glorify you in the kingdom, everyone should bow down to me. And the king said, that sounds interesting, good idea. Got it. Guys, he walks out of the king's palace, closes the door, new rule from the king, everyone's going to bow down to me. Meaning, you guys ready for this? Let's put on our Talmudic logic over here, our yeshiva brains. When Mordechai is not bowing down to Haman, is he disobeying the king? Or is he actually the ultimate loyalist, the ultimate person that is actually standing up for the true honor and glory of the king by not bowing down to anyone except the king? Everyone else is bowing down. They're treating Haman, they're treating a servant of the king like the king. They're the ones that are disobeying and being disloyal to the king. The only one that's truly being loyal and truly standing up to be loyal to the real master, to the real king, to Achashverosh, is Mordechai. Everyone else, they're following along. Everyone is afraid. Even the other people maybe also knew it wasn't real. But they were all afraid to stand out and to stand up against what Haman said. Haman had the secret henchman, his own secret police. He killed Hasach, but he didn't like what Hasach was doing. I'm sure he killed other people. They didn't mind killing people. So they were afraid, so they bowed down. Mordechai says, Just like Potiphar's wife was nudging Yosef, keep it a secret. Don't tell anyone that you're going to be secret with me. It'll be between me and you. No one will know. It'll be a secret. Right? But he knew that secret would be disloyal to his master. So what does Yosef do? He leaves his clothing in the hands of his mistress to be used to frame him as if he had been unloyal to his master. When he walked out of that house, Yosef knew that everyone would know that he had, so to say, raped or tried to rape his mistress. And everyone would say, Yosef is not loyal. If Yosef would have cheated, would anyone have known that he cheated? No. So everyone would have said, Yosef, you're so loyal. You're the best. Your master loves you. You run the whole house. No one will know that in secret he's actually being intimate with his master's wife. And instead of secretly disobeying his master, he's so loyal to his master, he's willing to be publicly accused of being unloyal to his master in order to maintain true loyalty. And Mordechai is willing to be accused of being unloyal to the king by not following the king's command of bowing down, because in his heart he knows the king would have never said that, and therefore he's willing to be accused of unloyalty because he's truly loyal. Do you understand how brilliant this is? The connection between Yosef and Mordechai is unbelievable. Yosef is allowed, I'm going to repeat again to make sure it's clear. Yosef is allowing himself to be made to look as if he's unloyal to his master by leaving his clothing in the mistress's hand, where she's going to publicly say he tried to go against my master. In order not to be secretly unloyal, right? If he would have been together, no one would have known. He would have looked loyal, but he would have really been. He would have looked loyal, but he would have really been stabbing his master in the back. But he would have looked loyal, but in truth, behind closed doors, he would have been as unloyal as could be. And so too, Mordechai is willing to be accused by every other minister in the gate, by the palace, as being unloyal to the king, as not following the king's rules. Accuse me, because in my heart I will not do what my heart knows is wrong. He could have bowed down, and in his heart he could have said, I'm just doing it as a charade, just to not to make Haman upset at me, not to make problems. He could have pretended to be loyal on the outside, but in his inside he knew he would be disobeying the king. It's amazing. Okay? That's, by the way, if you want to get really deep, should I go really deep? Yes? The Talmud says, how do we know Haman in the Torah? It says, everyone in Mordechai in the Torah, what's the source of Mordechai, what's the source of Esther? What's the biblical hint of Haman? So there's a verse, and when Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, so it says that Adam and Eve ate, God accused them, after they ate from the tree, so God comes to them, they're hiding in the garden, and God says, Hamin ha'etz. Hamin means from the eitz, the tree that I told you not to eat from, did you eat from it? The word Hamin ha'etz, Hey Mem Nun, from the tree did you eat, is the letters Hey Mem Nun, the name of Haman. Think about it. Haman. So Haman made a tree to hang Mordechai, and that's the source in the Bible for Haman from the one tree, Hamin ha'etz, from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from, that they ate from. What's the one thing that Haman can't get? Haman wants to be treated like a king. Haman wants everyone to bow down to him. And guess what? He has 99% loyalty and submission. 99% of the people in the kingdom are bowing down to him. Is he happy? No. There's one single tree that won't bow down. There's one single fruit in the garden that God says you can't eat, and that's the fruit that Adam and Eve want to eat from. There's one Jew in the whole kingdom that won't bow down, and Haman says, that's the Jew I need to get. Because Haman knew in his heart that there's one person who knows that I'm fake. There's one person who's truly loyal to the king. I'm pretending to be loyal, so it won't bow down to me. But it's all for fake. This guy is real. He's getting on my nerves. Hamin ha'etz, this is the one guy, that the one Jew, I have to hang him on the tree because he's truly loyal. Understand the brilliant how loyal Mordechai is? He's willing to be accused of disloyalty to be truly loyal to the king. It's amazing. However, you guys with me? Who's not loyal? Haman. I'm going to say this as a way of introduction to the question I'm going to ask you. Last week I told you that when Haman came into the king's palace in the middle of the night, that night that he couldn't sleep, right? We talked about the whole story. Achashverosh couldn't sleep because Achashverosh was insecure, and Achashverosh was thinking that maybe Haman and Esther are conspiring to kill me, and then he was maybe there's someone that I did a favor for, that I didn't repay them, and therefore because I didn't repay them, therefore they're not going to help me, so he calls up the Shimshi, son of Haman, to read him the books of Chronicles, and he doesn't want to read the book, and then the angel reads it about how Mordechai saved the life of Haman from Bixen and Seresh. So Achashverosh is thinking, I need a reward of Mordechai. And then who walks into the palace? He falls asleep and he has a dream where Haman's trying to kill him. Then Haman walks in and he says, Haman, what should I do to the man that I want to honor? We talked about this last week, but you have to remember these details because it's important for what I'm going to tell you next. And I told you last week that what did Haman ask for? Who remembers? Dressed in the royal robes of the king. The horse of the king. The crown of the king. He wanted the crown of the king. And when he says, I want the crown of the king, what does the king say? Uh-oh. His light bulb and his brain went off and says, uh-oh, this is dangerous. That's what I was afraid of. He wants the crown. That's really what Haman wanted. He didn't want loyalty to the king. He wanted the crown for himself. So as I pointed out to you in the Megillah last week, when Achashverosh gives Haman to dress Mordechai, what did he tell him to dress him in? The clothing, the royal clothing of the king, the horse of the king, but no crown. No crown. No crown. But here you see the true colors of Haman. He wants the crown. Mordechai is loyal. Mordechai doesn't want the crown. He's loyal, right? Okay, now let's turn to chapter 8. Chapter 8 is after Haman is hung. After the decree comes out, and Esther says, I'm a Jew and all that. What happens? Haman is hung on the tree, kids are hung on the tree. There's a big problem. They come to Esther and Mordechai, they fall on their faces, they bow down before Ahasuerus and say, the decree to kill the Jews is still standing. Just because Haman is dead, it's still a decree to kill the Jews. Right? What are we going to do about it? So what does he say? What does the king say? Sorry. Well, first he says, sorry, I can't do anything for you. Because once a decree is sealed by the king's signature, you can't revoke it. This is irrevocable. I can't annul the decree against the Jewish people. Now Mordechai has a big problem. So very nice, you killed Haman, you killed his 10 sons, but there's still thousands and thousands of anti-Semites. They'll be very, very happy to kill the Jewish people. So we're still in a state of danger. We're still in a state of potential annihilation by the haters of the Jews that have been authorized by the king's royal signature to have a day of unlimited murder where nothing will happen, where they're being encouraged by the king's officers and the king's army to protect them and to help them kill the Jews. What should we do about it? So Mordechai makes another decree. He can't revoke the first decree. He writes a second decree, also with the king's signature that now was given to him. And in the second decree he writes that the Jews should be allowed to defend themselves. Jews should be allowed to defend themselves. Which is what verse number 14 says, chapter 8, verse 14. After he wrote this decree, the couriers, those who ride the king's steeds, the camels, they went out, hastened and pressed by the king's order, and the edict was given in Shushan, the capital. Okay? We're going to get back to that verse. So the edict went out. But remember that verse, because it's going to be the answer to the question I'm going to ask you. And then what does the next verse say? Verse 15. O Mordechai, we say this pasuk aloud. We read the Megillah, we all read it together. O Mordechai, Yatzam lefnei HaMelech, Bovush Malchus. Mordechai left the king's presence with the royal robes, the royal raiment, the royal clothing, blue and white, and a huge golden crown. Keser Malchus Bereishis, says the verse. Bovush Malchus. With a big golden crown on his head. And a wrap of linen and purple. And the city of Shushan shouted and rejoiced. What in the world is going on? We just explained that the reason why Mordechai wouldn't bow down, hopefully Nafar liked that answer, is because he was so loyal to the king that he would never do anything to look like he's not loyal to he would never be unloyal to the king. He didn't want the crown. He'd even be willing to risk being called unloyal to not truly be unloyal. And now what happens? Exactly what Haman wanted, but Haman couldn't get. He's doing. Walking around with a crown on his head. How does that make sense?
But the king must have given it to him.
Yeah, the king gave it to him. But who cares? How is that loyalty? How is it loyalty to the king to walk around in the king's royal clothing, Bovush Malchus, in the king's royal clothing, with purple... What? He should have said, no way, Haman is walking around like he's the king. Why does Haman want everyone to bow down to him? He wants everyone to think he's the king, right? Let's understand the psychology here for a second. Haman wants you, every person in the kingdom, to see him walking around, bow down to the king. What does he ask the king for? Oh, the king wants to honor someone. What's his dream? If he could ask the king for anything he wants, the king says, I'm going to honor the man. What should I give him? What's Haman's request? Give him the royal horse, the royal robe, and the royal crown. Let me drive around Shushan with a crown like I'm the king, and all the ministers should walk around the front of me and say, here's the man the king wants to honor. Everyone should bow before me. I'm the king. That's what Haman wanted. Because Haman was the most unloyal, self-serving, self-centered, egotistical maniac you could imagine. That's who Haman was. He was a psychopath. He wanted all for himself. He was self-centered. He was ego. The epitome of ego is Haman. Mordechai is humble. Mordechai is loyal. Mordechai won't go against the king. So if Mordechai is so loyal to the king, why is he walking around with a crown on his head looking like he's a king? He's wearing royal clothing with a wrap of purple and linen and purple, and the city's rejoicing, and they're shouting, and they're bowing down. Everyone's rejoicing before him. A whole parade. It's a whole parade. When Mordechai goes out before the king, I don't think he walked out to walk home. I should clarify, there's a parade happening in this verse. He's on the royal entourage. He's on the royal horse, on the whole procession, and the whole city is rejoicing and looking at him. And he's like the Shushan parade, and Mordechai's in the front with a crown on his head. Where did he get a crown from? That's not loyalty to the king.
To make his decree seem real.
Beautiful. You want to know how here Mordechai is faced with the ultimate test. For those, the question clear? Before I go further, the question's clear? Yes? How does he have it? Yes? No? How does he have a crown on his head if he's loyal to the king? Haman didn't get the crown. He is walking around with a crown and all the royal garments. So here I'm going to show you something beautiful. At this moment, Mordechai is faced with the ultimate test of where is his true ultimate loyalty. Where is Mordechai's true loyalty? His true loyalty is not to the king. It's to the Jewish people. To the Jewish people. Mordechai knows. I made a decree. Verse 14, the decree went out. That the Jews can defend themselves against their enemies. Let's be honest. How effective is that going to be? If you don't change the psychology, the morale, if you don't change the playing field, and you have thousands of trained army soldiers, haters, they have a few Jews sitting in their houses with, what do they have in their house? Candelabra, I'm saying. Some gefilte fish, they're going to pour hot chicken soup on people. Like, what are they going to do? The Jews weren't a trained army. They give out chicken soup. They're like, what are they going to do? Just because you made a decree the Jews could defend themselves, the Jews weren't trained to defend themselves. The Jews didn't have the manpower or the weapons or the military to defend themselves. So there was already a decree to all of the king's officers to kill the Jews. It wasn't just to the haters. The haters were given the authority of the royal army, of all the officers, of every province. So in the province, the government's going to go kill the Jews, so the Jews can fight back. Mazel tov. How are they going to fight back? How is that going to help them? They'll still be killed. At that moment, Mordechai realized, I have to pretend that I am the king. I have to go against my nature of loyalty. I have to act in a way that won't look loyal to the king in order to truly be loyal, secretly loyal, to the people that I'm most loyal to, the Jewish people. And therefore Mordechai walks out of that palace and he arranges a whole parade to honor him, to go on that horse with a crown on his head. It's not because he wanted a crown on his head. Mordechai is sitting with a crown on his head and he's shivering and shuddering, thinking, what am I doing with a golden crown on my head? I don't want a crown on my head. But I have to do it for the glory, for the prestige, for the honor of the Jewish people, so that people should be afraid of them as if the king is behind them. Read verse number 17. The very next verse says the Jews were rejoicing. And then what does it say in the Megillah? Over Medina, in every province, and in every city, wherever the king's order and his edict reached, where the second edict reached, there was joy and gladness for the Jews. A banquet and a festive day. And many of the people of the land, they converted, they became Jews, because the fear of the Jews was upon them. You understand this? Mordechai walks out as if he's the king. I'm the king, I have the crown, I have the royal army behind me, the king is behind me. And all of those Jew haters, and all of those governors, and all those generals that could have fought against the Jews, they got really scared. And they saw the power of Mordechai with that big parade, with that whole fancy entourage, with his fancy purple and linen wrap around him, and his big golden crown. And they said, uh-oh, we're going on the Jews' side. We're converting, we're becoming Jews. We're going to fight for the Jews.
But isn't that going against the king?
It's going against the king, because his true loyalty is not to the king.
Not Mordechai. The other...
No, they think they're doing what the king said. The second decree said the Jews could fight back. So they could choose which decree to follow. They could follow the first decree that was under Haman's influence, or the second decree of Mordechai. Either way, you're doing the king's decree. The two conflicting decrees. So Mordechai has to now not just get a decree of the king, he got that. But a decree is only as powerful as the people that will uphold it. Mordechai has to change the entire prestige of the Jewish people in the land of Shushan, in the land of Persia. Mordechai has to go out of his natural comfort zone, do something that was against everything he had risked doing when Haman was alive, because his ultimate true loyalty is for the honor of the Jewish people, to protect the Jewish people. And because Mordechai went out acting as if he was the king, acting with a royalty and a grandeur that internally made him sick, but he had to do it for the honor of the Jewish people, to build them up, He was very successful. As the very next verse tells us that in every country they heard about Mordechai. Oh, with the golden crown on his head. Even Haman didn't have a golden crown. He's really the guy. We're going to be on his side. We're converting. We're joining the Jews. So all those armies and all those governors and all those leaders and all those important people, they all became Jews. So who was left? A few really hardcore, ideological anti-Semites. They got killed by the masses on the 13th.
So there was a fight?
There was. The Megillah tells us that there was 10,000 killed in this city, and Shushan took 2 days to kill them. But in one day, in Shushan took 2 days to kill all their enemies. The point is that a war is not just how much military you have. We see it's happening in Russia and Ukraine now. A war is not just who has more men and more guns. A war is a lot about the morale and the feeling of the people and the emotional investment. So the whole tide, the whole national discussion, the narrative, that's the national narrative of the Jewish people, is totally transformed when Mordechai walks out of that palace wearing a golden crown and purple kingly robes. Understand? So Mordechai is, in some ways, we'll talk about Esther next week, but Mordechai is a hero. Not because he was a scholar, because he was righteous, because he was all those things. And not just because he inspired the Jews to pray, which he was. And that's truly his greatness. He inspired 22,000 Jewish kids to come and study Torah and to say verses and to connect to Hashem. He did all that. And that created the miracle. But then after he made the miracle, he was willing to go against his own comfort zone and to do something that he had fought so hard not to do when Haman was doing it. And now he does it. Because that's how he'll prove his ultimate loyalty to the people he cares about the most, which are his fellow brothers and sisters, the Jewish people, who are saved because Mordechai walked out wearing a golden crown and made all the non-Jews convert. Okay, my friends?
Or Esther?
I'll talk about Esther next week. We'll talk about Esther, we'll talk about Mordechai. Next week. Really, God saved us. God saved us. And God would have saved us. But Mordechai had to walk out in these golden clothes, crown, and the royal robes in order to change the narrative of the Jewish people. That instead of the Jews being considered the enemy of the state, and the enemy and the pariah and the lowly people, we became the heroes. We became the chosen ones. Why? Because Mordechai walked out as a hero representing the king. And that's the greatness of Mordechai. Okay, my friends? It's a whole new perspective. We think Mordechai is a holy Jew praying, whatever, guiding you in secret. It's a beautiful story. When you read the words next week in the Megillah, Thursday, say, now you have a whole new appreciation of what Mordechai is doing. It's not just he's wearing royal robes, very nice. Mordechai is transforming an entire narrative of the Jewish people in the entire land of Shushan. Yeah, you have a question.
Maybe I missed it. But in the beginning you mentioned that they went
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, everyone that's watching. Hello, Faith. Yes.
that Haman and Mordechai went to the desert and
Yeah.
they became enslaved by some
Yeah.
woman or whatever. How did it switch though?
Mordechai never became a slave. Mordechai never made him a slave. He was a nobleman in the palace. It was just a reminder that there was a time when you were... I don't know if Mordechai had slaves. It's not... Mordechai was that kind of person. He never did anything with it. He just stuck it into Haman's face to remind him. Yeah, psychological warfare there. Okay, Shira, thank you. Thank you for this watching. Next week, God willing, is Esther. And then next week, Wednesday night, is a reading of Megillah, like 7:45. And Thursday, we'll have in the morning at 8 o'clock, and then probably 9:30. And Thursday evening, March 17th, 5:30 p.m., Purim in the Wild West. It'll be an outdoor party. It'll be a lot of fun. It'll be a lot of food and drinking and dancing and celebration. Mechanical Rodeo Bowl. Please do join us. Pesach coming up also, what? It's a week before. Okay. Thank you, everyone. God bless you all.